All right, excellent. All right, let's hop right in. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Melissa. As Melissa mentioned, this is the beginning of our webinar series. Today, we're going to talk about context, components, variables, and variants. Oh my, I couldn't help myself. Whenever anything is listed, 3 or more things, I just feel the need to give a tip of the hat to Wizard of Oz. So context, components, variables, and variants. Oh my. Why is the topic of this webinar relevant? So these features are the elements for building optimization projects on the Evolv AI platform. The relationships between them dictate how you and your team will conceptualize and implement tests. First up, we have contexts. A context is a location or place within your user experience. For example, this could be a product detail page or a product list page. Contexts are often identifiable as a page with a unique URL or a stage within your application flow. On the right-hand side here, we'll have a series of wireframes that help illustrate each of these concepts. So on the left-hand side of these illustrations, we have product detail page in more of a website format. And to the right, we have application, which is the checkout billing stage. So each of these has a darker gray element in the top here to kind of illustrate that we're in a particular location in a user experience. A context, another name for that, is a variable group to target specific places inside your user experience. So we'll get into variables a little bit later on in this. Any questions at this point? Actually, I think I'm going to say the format here is we're going to go through these different slides, and then we have a summary towards the middle where we can have an open floor for questions or comments or contributions from the Evolv team, who are all very familiar with these topics. Next up, we have components. A component is an element within a context of your user interface or UI. For example, a headline or a CTA button. A component can also be a group of elements within a context, like a bunch of links in a navigation bar. But deeper still, a component could be a single part of a multifaceted UI element, like a button that has a color, a copy, or a hairline around it. You could have a selector for each of those, or you could have a group which has them all as one. In Evolv AI's platform, variables represent aspects of a context UI that can change. These are comprised of individual or groups of components, which we believe could have an impact on a conversion event. Variables are typically paired with or described as hypotheses. Variants are the individual changes made to a variable, which are used to test hypotheses. Variants in a variable are mutually exclusive. This is important because that means that they will never appear together in the same experience. The performance of variants tells us whether or not our hypothesis is proven or not, or if more ideas should be tested, should iterate. So here we are at our summary. Context, a location or place within your user experience. Components, a single element within a context of UI. Variables, aspects of a context UI comprised of components for which you can create a test hypothesis. And variants, the individual changes that you can make to a variable, which are used to test a hypothesis. So I want to open the floor here briefly. I know we kind of spun through those things quickly, but are there any questions at this point about the relationships between these 4 things? All right. So this is kind of the meat, how these things come together, how Evolv AI uses them. Evolv's system generates combinations of variants and evenly distributes them to visitor sessions, collecting evidence to prove or disprove each hypothesis. Variants within the same variable will never combine, but variants from different variables within the same context must be able to combine without causing any conflicts. So when building a project, it's important to avoid conflicts. And that is one of the most important concepts, really, when putting a project together. There are situations where you need to make sure, or generally speaking, you always need to make sure, that your variants are not going to conflict with each other. That could happen in a bunch of different instances. One that I see commonly is when there is something that's being added to a page that doesn't exist there already, And then the desire can occur to create variants of that thing that is being created that's new on the page. But control doesn't have that element, right? So if, for example, there's a combination created where that is not on the page, but then you were to try to have variants for that, there's a situation where you could have a combination where you're making a change to that element, but it's not actually in front of the user and not part of that user experience. So that's a common situation where there could be a conflict. Does that make sense? All right.
Another good example there would be if you're considering changes to two different elements that are already exist on the page, but there needs to be some consistency between them. If you're changing a hero image and a headline, and the headline is supposed to is supporting a hero image, instead of treating both of those as separate variables in which you have different variants, and running the risk of a combination being created in which there's a disparity between a new hero image and a new headline, that you might choose to then have a single variable that changes both of those components.
Yes, thank you. I just realized my camera was off this entire time. Hello, everybody. So why is all this important? Project structure. These features provide the structure necessary to target and affect the elements within a user interface for which experimentation hypotheses have been created. Understanding these features and the relationships between them will allow you and your team to build successful projects which provide accurate results. So just to recap here, context, components, variables, variants, and combinations. Any other questions from folks at this point? All right, cool. So next up, we're going to hop into a quick live demo of creating components and contexts. But I also actually want to hop to here real quick. Tomorrow we'll be having office hours. So everyone's welcome to join those. What to expect, we'll have an open format in collaboration with our lead expert services developer, Brian Norman. So please come with questions on either the topics we covered today or any issues that you've run into while using Evolv AI tools. That will be tomorrow, April 12th, 10:30 a.m. to 11:15 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Melissa and I will share this presentation afterwards to all the attendees. So there's a link here to join that meeting. All right, everyone's favorite thing, live demos. So here we have the Evolv website. We already have a context created for that. So let's take a step to another page and create a new context. To create a context, first up, you're going to click on the Add button up here, which will change the UI of the tool a bit and have the opportunity to click this button, Create Context. Here you'll name your context and save it. So now we have two contexts in this project, the home page and the platform page. When you click on either of these contexts on the left-hand side, the viewer, the window here will refresh to show that particular context. We have an inspect tool here built that allows you to then move over the different elements or components rather inside of your user interface and select those. So as you can see here, here's an opportunity to create a group of components as a variable, or you can get even deeper and select an individual component. So let's take the copy of this button as another component. Another thing to note here is that the components that are listed that you add, they change according to the context that you have selected currently. So over here in the editor tool on the right, you'll see the opportunity to start to edit these the components that you have selected. Everyone at Evolv is a great person, so this sort of made sense. So there's an example of creating a context and making an edit to that directly. But what we need to do actually is not edit this directly, because that would be changing control. And now start creating our first variable. So inside of this context, we're going to click the plus button. We'll call this CTA copy. We'll rename the variant, say talk to an expert. This is the control state. Now what we'll do is we will create our first variant. And when we are creating our first variant, we have this component selected down here. So now we'll name this talk to a great person. We'll edit the copy for it. There we go. That is our control variant and our test variant. And we have selected a component that's inside of that variable that we're changing with those variants. So we have our context, the platform page, and we have our variable. We have our control version of the variant for the component that's inside of that variable, and our test, our variant for that. Any questions at this point? I think that's about as far as I'm going to go with the demo side of this at this point. I suppose what we could do is create another variant and then start building a combination, though. Does anyone have any questions at all, or want to circle back to any of the slides, or discuss any particular relationship between these things? All right.
I think another example is a great idea.
All right, let's do it. All right. H1 copy. So we're going to create another variable. Call it H1 copy. Now we'll rename our control variant to be the copy of control. And with our component selected, we'll create a variant for that.
Make it a good one.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm mulling over right now. Let's go with an experimentation process that could change the world. How's that?
Perfect.
All right, here we go. All right, so we now have two variables and a variant for each of them. So let's switch over to QA mode inside of the editor and create a combination out of these. So with this radio button, we'll activate each of these variants for these variables. And we'll hit play. There you go. An experimentation process that could change the world. Talk to a great person. And if that's not inviting, I don't know what is. You can also see here that a combination can be made up of just one variant or test variant of a variable, and then also a control variant of a variable, which means in that combination, only one change will be seen. This is the default state for when an idea is first tested during its initialization. Every single new idea that you add into the Evolv platform will first be tested in isolation against control to gather a baseline understanding of the impact that that idea has in comparison to control. And then once the system has that baseline, it's then ready to mix it with other ideas and see how mixing those ideas together in combination could potentially create even more lift to your conversion event that you are optimizing for. So we really kind of whipped through our content here.
This is awesome. Well, I think that I'd love to open up the floor for anybody that has anything they wanted to maybe ask about if they have tried this before. Would love to hear any feedback, questions, challenges. We can even take a look at the demo together and answer any questions from over there. But would love to open up the floor to everybody joining us for anything that you could want to double click on or talk a little bit more about.
Absolutely. Someone give me a question.
Don't be shy.
Yeah.
So it looks like the variables sort of behave like an A/B test. Can you talk about that?
Certainly. So when we create projects inside of our platform, depending on the velocity or how frequently your conversion event happens, is going to dictate how many non-control combination spots you have inside of your experiment. So this is one of the major differentiating factors between Evolv and other platforms. We are able to give you continuous optimization. And the way that we do that is that instead of just having your traffic split between one and two things, and 50-50 split, or an ABN test, which would be anything sort of beyond two, we are setting up your traffic to be split into as many different non-control groups as possible, as many as the conversion event that you're optimizing for can support within a reasonable amount of time. Because when you're splitting your traffic up, you need to be able to collect for each one of those buckets conversions of your conversion event. So the more times you split up your traffic, the longer it takes for those buckets to fill up. And approximately when something is starting its testing, it needs around 400 conversions of your conversion event in order for it to establish its first credible interval for that idea. So let's say you have your conversion event happening frequently enough that you could have 5 or 10, let's go with 10 combinations, combination slots inside of your experiment. This is different than A/B testing because now you're splitting up your traffic into 10 parts. And depending on how many variables and variants you create inside of that experiment, after they have initialized, you are going from sort of an ABN state where each one of those things first start by getting traffic on their own with control. The system will understand how those things perform individually when being tested against control in respect to the conversion event that you've chosen. But once, again, those things have collected enough samples of your conversion event happening, they are now able to be turned into multivariate testing, which is what we call the optimization phase. Move out of the initialization phase where everything is individually tested against control and into the optimization phase. And this is where the system can now take each of those individual variants and move them into combinations with each other. So now a combination could have a control variant from one variable and a different variant from another variable, a different variant from another variable, and have all of those things brought together to the point where, ostensibly, you could have a combination if you have, let's say, 12 variants or something like that across 10 variables. You could have 10 different changes inside of a single combination. And it would put all of those together and give that combination now a 10th of your traffic to understand how those things work together and see if when they're put together, they work better. And it will be doing that alongside all these other combination slots. So every single combo will be made up of a unique group of variants, and all of them will be getting the same amount of traffic, which was set by how many combination slots you have from the beginning. And the system will be now testing each of those in comparison to control. One of your combination slots will always be control, and that is what those non-control combinations are compared to. So they always receive the same amount of traffic. And that's what allows them to have a fair and equal comparison. So as the system starts to understand how that combination, which has multiple variants inside of it, is performing against control, whether it does well or doesn't do well, it will keep it around longer or switch it out and bring in new different combinations of variants. Do you think that answers the question?
So I think where I'm what I was thinking is that the variables look like A/B tests themselves with a control. But I think what you were describing is how the system is able to test multiple A/B tests, to run multiple A/B tests at the same time using combinations. And the way it does so allows all those tests to be measured in a statistically rigorous way.
Yes. So once you move into the optimization phase, you will always have a set number of non-control combination slots for things to be put into. But what's different about this is you can continue to add more and more ideas and continue to test those against control as you move along. Whereas if you have an A/B test or an ABN test, traditionally, you're not able to add more ideas to it. And you're sort of moving towards figuring out what's statistically significant, whereas this allows for flexibility and allows you to continually grow your search space, which is all of the different possible combinations that your variants together produce, which can reach into the hundreds of thousands or even millions of ideas or possible combinations. And the system will be looking at how combining all those different variants together finds the best possible lift to your conversion event. So as Jonathan was saying, you're splitting up your traffic in a way that kind of feels like A/B, but the fact that these can continuously change allows them to not really be an A/B test. You're always comparing each individual combo or non-control combo against control, but those can be switched out and turned into new different groups of variants and that make up combinations. So it allows for what we call continuous optimization. All right, cool.
Are there any other questions before we come to a close? Awesome. Well, like Will said, we will send around the recording of this and the deck as well for everybody's benefit. And then tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. PST will be the office hours that we'll called out earlier. So the office hours is going to be our first iteration of office hours, will be hosted by Brian Norman. He is one of our expert services solutions architects who will be able to answer your questions, help troubleshoot any problems, and do some additional demo of anything that may be relevant as it comes up in conversation. So if you are interested in attending that, please do join us. The Zoom link is right here on this slide, and everyone who is at the webinar today should have received an invitation as well. But if you have not, don't hesitate to reach out to any of your contacts over here at Evolv, and we'll make sure that we add you to that invitation. But thank you all